Dr. Deborah Mash is one of the world's foremost experts on the hallucinogenic drug ibogaine. She is the CEO and founder of DemeRx, a clinical stage drug development company advancing the naturally occurring substance found in plants largely in West Africa. This substance can serve many purposes in small doses and in large. With more on ibogaine and its uses, Dr. Deborah Mash joins us now. Welcome, Dr. Mash.
Thank you. I really sincerely appreciate the opportunity to talk to our listeners and viewers today about ibogaine. This has been a very long journey for me. I've been working on this pharmaceutical development program for almost close to 30 years now. So, and there's a lot of new interest in ibogaine and a lot of new knowledge, and I really welcome this opportunity. So what I'd like to do by introducing this topic is to start with the first slide and to give you a little bit of the background of ibogaine's history. Ibogaine has a history that goes back over 100 years, and since its first description of ethnobotanical use in Africa. Ibogaine is used in Africa as part of a religious ceremony. So like many other psychedelic molecules that have a historical use as part of religious practice, ibogaine is used by members of the Witi religion in the region of Gabon and Cameroon. And it really is used in this sort of ethno-Christian syncretic type of religious setting. And I've described it in the past as a kind of chemical bar mitzvah where members of the church become members of the tribe. And it really is an initiation ceremony. But ibogaine was also marketed in France under the trade name Lamborine until the 1970s in low-dose formulations. And those low-dose formulations were used to help patients to increase mood and to be a mild stimulant. The potential of ibogaine as an addiction interrupter was first described in the early 1970s. And this is the seminal discovery by Howard Lutzoff, who took a dose basically to get high himself to have the psychotropic effect of the ibogaine. And there was an underground movement of ibogaine use in the context of other therapeutic use of other molecules like psilocybin and LSD at the time. And ibogaine made its way into this underground therapy groups coming out of California and the Northeast in the United States. But Howard himself, who had struggled with dependence on heroin and opioids, took a dose of ibogaine and discovered that he was completely detoxified from his drug addiction. And the other amazing thing was that not only did it block the signs and symptoms of withdrawal, but it also made him not want to go out and use the drug again. So this profound addiction interruption. I had been working in the area of cocaine dependence at the University of Miami in my academic work, and I first learned about ibogaine in the 1990s. And I actually had the opportunity to go to Amsterdam to see Howard Lutzoff administer ibogaine in that setting. I was so amazed at what I saw that I thought it was very important to move this into the clinic and to really have a well-controlled clinical study to understand the risk and the benefit of ibogaine and really to understand the mechanistic underpinnings of this drug. Why would one dose of ibogaine have such a profound effect on behavior and bring about this radical behavioral change, allowing people to make this transition to abstinence? We were very fortunate, and our drug actually moved forward with the FDA, but unfortunately we were unable to fund the studies. Today, ibogaine is used in many different settings around the world, mostly where it is unregulated. And our group was also the first to identify that ibogaine is a really complicated molecule because it also has an active metabolite. The most significant advance for our research was the joint venture agreement between our company and Atai Life Sciences, a company dedicated to move ibogaine forward and to support the clinical development program and the costs, the money that it will take to actually move this forward with regulatory review. So this was a big a big increase for ibogaine and really increased the hope that the drug would be studied in a formal setting. In 2017, the United States of America hit its peak in the opioid epidemic. And as many of you today on this call know, the numbers haven't gone down. And in fact, during COVID, the time of COVID-19 and this pandemic, we've seen an increase. People are unable to go to their meetings. So many people have relapsed. And it's really a stunning situation for us in our country, also in Canada, and also in other parts of the world. This slide illustrates the cost of the problem, and it's significant. It's estimated today that the global burden of disease is on the order of about 45 million people currently abusing opioids. The medicines that are approved, there aren't many. We have naltrexone, which can be used to help prevent relapse when opioid-dependent patients have been already detoxed from their drugs. But today, the first line is substitution therapy. So in other words, methadone, which can also be used as a taper medicine, but also for substitution. And then, of course, Suboxone or buprenorphine. When I first began DemeRx many years ago, actually, back in 2010, the volume of sales in the United States for buprenorphine were on the order of about 300 million. It's estimated today that it's well over, almost close to 2 billion, and the rate of growth, annual rate of growth, will be about 10%. So the first line treatment is to take people off their abused drugs and to give them substitution therapy with Suboxone and or methadone. The cost in the United States is well over $1 trillion since the beginning of the opioid epidemic, and it's likely to exceed another 500 billion over the next 3 years. So this is a huge societal cost. Many patients who have been locked into this intractable cycle of opioid dependence want out. They want to break this intractable cycle and be off of all drugs. So while some patients can't detoxify well, we know that it's important to allow patients to have an ability to medically manage withdrawal. And this is often the first step, necessary step in the road to recovery. Today, this slide illustrates what's available. The only approved drugs are methadone, which has been approved for the detoxification indication. Buprenorphine and clonidine are used what we call off-label, so they haven't been approved by the FDA or other regulatory agency for this indication, but they are used clinically, and of course they are approved medications. In 2018, the FDA approved the first non-opioid treatment for management of opioid withdrawal symptoms in adults. So formally speaking, there are two methods that patients can detox, either a methadone taper or a lofexidine taper. But what we know from this is that many patients are unable to successfully detox. And why is that? Well, we've learned a lot, and you heard a little bit of the discussion in the prior talk on ketamine about the neurobiology. What happens when a person becomes addicted to opioids? And why is it so difficult to just stop taking them? Just say no, get off the drugs. Just like throw away your cigarettes, throw away your opioids. Well, it's not that easy. And the reason is that when you're abusing opioids and you become tolerant to their effects, these opioids hijack your brain. They actually cause fundamental changes in the underlying neurochemistry of your brain. They also modify the DNA, the DNA inside the cells that are part of this addiction circuit in the brain. And of course, the reason you take opioids, the reason people like to take opioids is because they feel the euphoria, the high, but because they're short acting, as you become dependent on them, then you're going through these cycles of getting high and wearing off the drug. So it's like little mini cycles of withdrawal, which continues to kindle these addiction circuits in the brain. When people detoxify and go completely off of opioids, they enter into a second phase, which is called the post-acute withdrawal stage. Life stress, other things that happen to the individual, disappointments, all the back trauma that probably got them into trouble with the opioids that they were self-medicating in the first place, comes back and re-triggers the loop. And that's why relapse is a common occurrence. Many patients white knuckle their sobriety, but then life stress puts them back on the road to relapse. This slide illustrates our pivotal FDA approval and the dates back in 1993 and again in 1995, where the FDA was extremely collaborative and helpful to us. But unfortunately, this academic investigator initiated phase 1 safety and pharmacokinetic study never advanced due to a lack of funds. I did something that was a bit maverick at the time, which was to take the guidance of the regulatory agency and our experts and academic consultants and go offshore. And in 2018, we published data from our government-approved program, our R&D program with ibogaine in the Caribbean. And this paper was published in Frontiers in Pharmacology, and it is to date the largest case series, open label observational safety, pharmacokinetics, and efficacy data in ibogaine patients who sought detoxification with the drug. There was a total of 191 subjects who participated in this trial. Most of them were opioid dependent. The other group were cocaine dependent patient volunteers. This slide illustrates what we know about the complex pharmacokinetics of ibogaine. And again, this is work that was done by my group and in my laboratory. What you see here is a classic, what we call a pharmacokinetic curve. So when you take the drug, how long does the drug stay in your body? How long does it wash out of the bloodstream? What do we know about the time course of the drug? And in the top panel of the slide, we're illustrating a very important point, and that is that we know that ibogaine has very complex pharmacokinetics. So there are fast, slow, and poor metabolizers, what are called poor metabolizers, and everything in between. So not everyone metabolizes the drug the same way. We also know that this molecule, although very effective, has what we call a narrow therapeutic, potentially to toxic window. So it's very important to have these types of data. We were able to demonstrate here that noribogaine has a very long half-life in the blood. That's the green line. And you see the ibogaine, which is shown in red, is washing out within 24 hours. So this suggested to us that the oniric effects of the drug were due to the peak concentration of ibogaine in the body, and that over time that would be cleared, and then the noribogaine would have a long-lasting effect. And this makes good sense, intuitive sense, with what we know to be the time course for opioid withdrawal syndrome. When you stop taking opioids, your peak symptoms are usually within the first to second day. For some people on longer acting opioids like Suboxone or methadone, they can peak a little later and last a little longer. But then this is followed by what is called a post-acute withdrawal syndrome, which really is very difficult for many patients. And this is that although they're not suffering the cold turkey symptoms, the nausea, the vomiting, the muscle cramps, the racing heart, they'll have continuous symptoms around mood, depression, anxiety, and yes, drug craving. And this slide, which illustrates the acute effects of ibogaine on withdrawal, shows that it really is very effective. It has stunning efficacy for blocking the acute signs of withdrawal. And this has been replicated and published in the case reports that I've cited on this slide for those that are interested. So we know that ibogaine blocks opioid withdrawal symptoms after abrupt cessation of opioid discontinuation. But what was also very interesting was that we were able to demonstrate, much like you heard about ketamine, that ibogaine would also improve depression scores. So this is the Beck's depression inventory, and we were able to demonstrate both in opioid-dependent patients as well as in cocaine-dependent patient volunteers that you get a rapid antidepressant effect. And what's interesting about this is that the possible mechanism of action for this is the same as ketamine, because ibogaine 2 acts on the same glutamate circuit that is affected by ketamine. So you're getting a glutamate and serotonergic reset with ibogaine. Craving scales were also shown to be markedly diminished. And, we saw this by talking to the patients, and the patients would tell us, I'm not craving to go out and get high. But we wanted to track this formally. So we used a craving questionnaire that was developed at Johns Hopkins University, which looked again at negative mood states, the desire or intent to use the drug, go out and get high. In other words, lack of confidence in the ability to quit, and expected benefits of drug use. Oh, I'm going to feel a lot better, my anxiety, if I go out and use again. I'd like to go out and use. No, across the board, ibogaine was shown to be effective on craving scores. So it blocks craving. In terms of the oniric effects of ibogaine, many people have argued about whether this is important to the therapeutic efficacy. And in terms of ibogaine being a transformative therapy and bringing about this reset and re-engaging the brain and bringing about the neuroplasticity, this seems to be an important part. And the way that we did this is that we did what was called a structured elicitation narrative to actually learn from our volunteers who gave consent to take ibogaine in this R&D setting. And they told us that 90% endorsed that it was useful for drug problems, that they felt that they had been given insights into their drug problems, and that they had a second chance. So the idea here is, can we unlearn harmful behaviors, beliefs, and habits? Can the brain heal itself and rewire itself? And again, this is why psychedelic medicines those in the psychiatric field are very excited potentially about this, because it really may be engaging many of the neuroplastic circuits in the brain, which will then be of importance for bringing about this transition to abstinence in the case of ibogaine. So opioid use disorder, the way we think about it from a neurobiological standpoint, is that it's an acquired disease. It's definitely has complex mechanisms that are dysregulated in the brain. It is a chronic disorder that has very high rates of relapse. How do we treat it? Well, we believe that the multi-target actions of ibogaine are what explains the mechanistic underpinnings for why it brings about, it really promotes a very rapid transition to abstinence after only a single dose, and that the metabolite noribogaine may also be contributing to the beneficial effects. This is very exciting news for patients. That's the good news. But what's the bad news? The bad news is that there has been a vast underground experiment of ibogaine. There has been people who have used ibogaine in unsafe settings. There have been reports of ibogaine-related deaths because people have taken it without proper medical monitor. So again, I said on this presentation, ibogaine has a narrow therapeutic to toxic window. Now, ibogaine has been given safely. It was given safely in our studies, and it has been replicated by others, most notably Dr. Alberto Sala and his collaborators at Clear Sky, who have treated over 1,500 patients or more without a reported death or serious adverse event. So we're optimistic that this can go forward. And we intend to do that. Our program is advancing ibogaine through regulatory review And we hope to have some very good news that we'll be reporting to the community soon about the development through the clinical regulatory agencies on its way towards approval as a medication for the many millions of patients who suffer from opioid dependence. And of course, this can't come fast enough, especially in a post-COVID environment where many more people have, because of their isolation, have suffered depression and relapse back to opioid dependence. So I'm really excited today to have been part of this discussion, and I always look forward to sharing the good news and helping to promote this research. Thank you very, very much.